All right, everybody, welcome to Tesla Today. We've got data to show you that Tesla's continuing to kill it up to right now, year-to-date numbers. There was a price war agreement in China with 16 manufacturers agreeing to stopping the price war, but a few days later, they had to stop that. And we've got new information on Ford and GM's strategy and what they need to address right away. We've got Jeff Lutz with us.
Great to be with you, Herbert.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So please follow Jeff at the Jeff Lutz on Twitter. He's previously a chief quality officer and senior level supply chain executive. So let's get started. We've got news here. This is one of your tweets, Jeff, that I always love because you point out that in the first quarter of this, the second quarter of this year, Tesla's 20,000 delivery about which beat the 466 shipments wasn't that big, but then when you compare Ford and GM, their total Q2 EV deliveries combined is 30,000. I love that. And this is a nice way Tesla Hype put it together.
Yeah, just trying to put some perspective on it. There were short sellers that were actually calling me out on Twitter, and also I noticed the fintech media coverage was like, yeah, it's a beat, but it's 20,000 cars. But then when you actually put it in perspective, it's a big beat. When you put it in perspective with what Ford and GM totally shipped in the quarter, it shows you how big that is, and it's a big deal. I just trying to put the right perspective around it. It seems like fintech is trying to twist themselves up in the knots, either trying to play the number down, or kind of uplift others.
Right. Okay, so here we've got data that came out very recently. This shows all of the manufacturers, the auto manufacturers, comparing them year to date against each other, all cars, all different kinds of cars, not just the electric vehicles. And you can see down here, Tesla's at the bottom, 343,000. This is year to date, and they're growing 50% growth and all that. So you can see that they're already ahead of Subaru and Volkswagen Group.
Yeah, I mean, if you continue on that path, this is US, right? So you continue on this path, they'll be closer to the middle of the pack, a year from now, and then another year they're going to be basically in the top three. And you have to think that the top three are going to start declining as well. There's been a big, kind of demand spike due to the supply issues that some of the top manufacturers have had over the last couple of years. And you'll see this in some of the data we'll share a bit later, that car sales are actually they were very strong in the first half, and they've actually increased in strength even throughout the quarter. But this growth from the big number is the growth, and this is what suppliers look at as well. Suppliers look at, okay, by the way, and all these numbers are against kind of pandemic level, supply level, supply chain, issues and so forth. But when you actually do the comps back to 2019, pre-pandemic, you'll find that the big automakers actually are not growing. They're even, they're either flat to 10% declining, whereas Tesla is on this steady growth pace.
Wonderful. Yeah. Let's take a look now at total top EVs. So that was all cars. This is just the electric vehicles. And of course, we know that Model Y and Model 3 are top. This is year to date in the US. We pointed this out already at the earlier table there. Chevy Bolt is way down. And then even Model S is one of the tops. So clearly, like we pointed out many times before, we're in the hundreds and thousands, and that's even going to grow significantly while everybody else is in the tens or 20s. And what's your thought when you saw this?
If you think of Tesla's supply chain, the 3 and the Y, there's a lot of commonality between those vehicles, especially when on the inbound parts that they order from suppliers. So if you look at that, you're over 310,000. You're basically, I don't know, many times more than everything combined. So again, from a supply base perspective, from an interest supply chain perspective for Tesla, this leverage continues to grow. It's very meaningful. And what it means is, fewer number of SKUs, less complexity, less changeover. For suppliers, it means, when suppliers look at like that GM number on the prior page and you see the 1.2 million, like, wow, I want to get GM, I want to get them as a partner. Well, yeah, I mean, you would, but then when you take that 1.2 million and you spread it across literally hundreds and thousands of configurations, from a supplier perspective, you're actually not gaining a lot of efficiencies doing business with them unless you just charge them a huge margin. So, which is not just that's just not going to be something that's sustainable, especially post COVID. So, from a supplier perspective, you want kind of that large volume on that single SKU, and that's what Tesla's really doing with the 3 and the Y, and that's great for them. It's great for their efficiencies, and it's also good for them in terms of like ramping, in this case, Austin, and scaling up that facility.
Yeah. Isn't it wonderful though? We're actually comparing Tesla, which is an electric vehicle kind of a car against all cars, and we're already there. We're already competing, and you're predicting, and we're all predicting it's actually going to rise up and beat them. It's wonderful. This is no longer just EVs against EVs. This is now all cars. And what I like what you said earlier was that not only is this going to change the positioning of the kind of the most who sell, but also as Tesla goes up faster, the others will fall. Right? There's going to be that
That's right.
exponential curve. As this goes up, this one falls, and so it will happen sooner than most people are thinking. Um, this is a table that showed the top nameplates. This is not just cars; it also includes trucks. Again, in the U.S., year to date, and so yeah, Tesla Model Y is already 190, and Ford F Series is clearly the leader. We know that, and why? So they're also growing too. I guess that's a COVID response to the year before and the recession issue.
Yeah, it's supply driven. I mean, if you look at this over many years, I haven't plucked out F series. F series is strong. We shouldn't take anything away from the strength of Ford and what they own, because they're building a very large customer base who, could be repeat buyers of it. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that follow through, by the way, with the Lightning yet. But so we shouldn't take much away from it. But I think what you should take away is like the top 3 nameplates in the U.S. Almost 900,000 cars.
Mhm.
Really, I mean, a significant number just in pickups. The U.S.
Yeah.
likes pickup trucks, so I mean, it kind of speaks to the power of this introduction of the Cybertruck in the upcoming segment. And I think what these top 3 competitors have to be concerned about is that they're going to invariably lose share to Tesla. But what's even more scary are the number of people that will buy a Cybertruck that would not have bought a standard conventional pickup truck before. I think they should be a little even more concerned about that, because that's also going to be cannibalizing from other. It's not going to be cannibalizing from Model Y, but it's going to be cannibalizing from other segments. So I think they've got 2 vectors to be concerned about: their existing business, as well as just the growth in pickup trucks that will kind of go this potential non-conventional route. You can't discount the 1.85 million pre-orders, because then you should be discounting when Lightning went on pre-order. I think they had a 200,000, and Rivian, I think they had 100,000. Then just discount that. But if you compare the pre-order, sizes, I mean, there's no comparison to 1.8 million versus the pre-order sizes that these other companies have. So something's got to give. Are they going to convert the 1.85 million? Probably not, because that would take several years. But if they even do a fraction of that, this is a runaway success that won't be in supply for years.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about more about that. So this is year to date. So let's assume half the year, right? And then so yeah, how long will it take Cybertruck in terms of production capability for them to get to these numbers? Right? This is half a year, so you double that for the full year probably. Um, right? And so
Yeah,
we already know maybe 20, maybe 50,000 if we're lucky for this year, or less actually. But what's your expectation? Now, the thing about the Cybertruck was they said that it was designed in manufacturing first approach, which is they
yeah.
designed it to be easier and quicker to design. So theoretically, once they have the factories line stabilized, they should be able to scale that much faster than even the Model Y. That's my understanding of what they meant by that. What's your expectation?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to think about it. Uh, I think there's an engineering and operations issues list that they're working through right now to get the product to the yield targets they want for ramp. They're going to probably start at lower yields. They're going to probably have issues at some of their suppliers. But this is every product ever made in history. Um, and I would say there's a lot of new things happening with Cybertruck, and I think that's what Tesla wants to work through are the newness. And once they get through some of these new things, once they get, this Erta press running, running in a very stable manner, giving very stable output. And when I say stable, I mean dimensional stability of the parts coming off of it. And it's just one example. If they're sealing the cabin, that's another thing that manufacturers struggle with is getting great sealing for anything you try to do that's water or dust resistant. That's for consumer use or industrial use. So these are kind of these big issues list items. But I think Tesla, to back to the core point, I think they use design for manufacturability and DFX concepts at the core of designing this product, and that was to reduce the number of parts in the product, reduce the number of that's called in the industry consumables. That's it, tapes and adhesives and weld points that are used in the product. When you reduce all that complexity, you'll once you actually stabilize and you get all the newness stuff out of the way, you figured it out, then you're right. The ramp could probably go that S curve can probably be a lot more vertical than a standard ramp with all these standard complexity. So I think they just got to knock out what's new to them and what's new to the industry. We sometimes we refer to it as new, unique, and difficult. We actually give it a name. We call it NUD in the
Oh,
industry: new, unique, and different or difficult.
yeah.
And we literally tag it like, is this new to us? Is this new to the industry? Is this unique to us? Is this unique to the industry? Is this difficult or different? And to us or the industry? And you kind of go figure out your approach to it. If it's difficult for us, but maybe not, it's already been done in the industry, then maybe you go out and you seek industry experts to come in and help you out. So I would think the NUD list on a Cybertruck is quite large, but I think they designed it in a way of like once they've gone up those individual ramp curves and solved those NUDs, it will be a very high yielding, lower cost product to manufacture.
Hey, Jeff, I've never heard of that. New, unique, and difficult. This is a chief vice president, a corporate vice president's terminology that I just haven't reached that level to know these things. So,
Yeah, you don't have a lot of time when you're building products, so you kind of have to tag things by
yeah,
complexity level. And so you really want to understand what's new to you because you want to put a focused effort on it, and you
yeah.
want to time phase it earlier so you can kind of work on it and work the bugs out before you're doing the main core ramp on the product.
Okay. First of all, I want to do a shout out to Omar Holmar's catalog. That's where I got all those graphs from just now. And then this one here from James Stevenson. He came up with a couple of really good, beautiful charts. So he said, fill in the blank. The competition is, what did you say, Jeff? What was your blank?
Yeah, I mean, not coming. I mean, this is. I mean,
One
there's
word.
more models. There's more models being introduced. Um, but I think a lot in fintech they get confused with more models and scale. More models doesn't equal scale. What Tesla is doing equals scale, where you're driving that one product and you're driving the capability and manufacturing capability of that one product, so you can take its cost structure down, pass those savings along to consumers, but in the background you're actually improving your gross margins in the process. Again, I think we're going to have a trough quarter here with gross margins, but you can see what Tesla is doing. Um, and it's the right move, both medium and long term.
Okay. So what we're seeing here is the global EV market share. This is 2022 at the bottom. This is year to date May 2023 here. The red is Tesla. The light orange is BYD. Then you've got Volkswagen. Then you've got two other Chinese companies. So GAC is Guangzhou Automotive Corporation, something like that. This is Wuling. And then you've got all the others in small, tiny slices. So clearly, this is the leaders. Here we are. This is 20%. Okay, year to date, we're holding steady at 20%. I mean, that is the number that we'd be very happy with if that's what stays. But you can clearly see that the competition is mostly the Chinese companies, like we all kind of know at this point, globally, if we look at it from all segments too. Just wait what will happen when Tesla comes out with their lower price compact car. We'll see what happens to these guys here. So we'll see.
Yeah, and James does great charts, and another way to look at this, and we looked at this in the smartphone world as well as like, okay, get great market share, but the other thing to look at, and what Apple and did a really good job of, is margin share, which is, there's 1.2 billion smartphones shipped in a year, but they're only shipping 250 million of them. But if you look at the percent of margin dollars they're capturing, it's most of it. And I think that would be an interesting thing to look at for Tesla as well, as margin share, in addition to market share.
Nice. That's a very good point. Very good point. Okay.
Because
So this is
that
just
orange from BYD,
yeah,
there's not
yeah.
they're not making money on
Right.
the EV side.
Yeah. We'll share information on that shortly. You're correct.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. So this is basically units sale. So Jeff, I wanted to ask you this question, right? Because I honestly do think that there is a lot of corollary between the smartphone industry and the electric vehicle market
Right.
that's happening right now. You were corporate vice president. You were responsible for helping the Android come out and take kind of at least some market share, the vast majority of market share against Apple. But you just pointed out that the vast majority of the margins was still Apple. I think the same thing's happening here, right? But so I guess my question is that you see all these units. Here's here's what is happening here. But look what's happening right now. I mean, I guess this is early innings, and so my guess would be that this is what you'd expect, and then eventually it will end up with just two major players, three major players, and then the rest will go to the wayside. Or is it always going to be like this? Lots of little tiny people here. Like, how I had Android versus iOS. Now it's going to be something like that, or what are you expecting?
Well, we haven't even talked about operating systems, right? Because um, there's not clarity there. I think Apple and Android are trying to, they have their own Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. We haven't even talked about that. I know that wasn't the point. Your point is like, how many
Yeah,
players are there going to be? I think one of the things that's going to drive the top players is who has a software ecosystem
that's
that
true.
can be translated and scale globally. And I think that's where BYD is not a software company. And I think they're going to struggle. And it's a declarative statement. I understand there's software engineers there, and they're doing obviously great work. They're getting to Europe and so forth. But I don't think that they're going to have the ability from a software perspective to localize their software and scale it the way Tesla is able to. Tesla built a really efficient software operating system, both in the car and actually what actually runs their factories and runs their whole supply chain and engineering functions and connects them together. But I think some of these other companies are going to struggle. Like, how's a Wuling gonna localize itself for the U.S. and what app ecosystem is it going to tie itself to, and where's the data going to go? Like, it's just not going to work. So you look at BYD, for example, and what are they going to hitch their wagon to? People in the US are, they know Apple, they know Android, they know Tesla's operating system in the car is now becoming very ubiquitous. And I mean, what's the move from BYD on the software front and the localization front? Because Apple and Android aren't going to do localization of like the core software and all the regulatory work. They're not going to do that for them to localize. So I think that's going to be one of the things that's going to make it a very small cluster. And the real thing out there is who's going to make money. Like, who's going to get the kind of scale, and who's going to have the design that's going to yield them the kind of margins to even, like, how long can BYD do this at basically losing money on EV? That's the question.
Yeah. So actually, I think I have a prediction of what might happen. Okay. I think that there's a lot of similarities between the smartphone revolution and what happened there with what's happening with the electric vehicle. You're very smart, and thank you for continuing to remind us that this is not just an EV change; it's a software revolution, and who can do this. So that's a big difference between what happened back then, because you had Samsung step up, you had Google step up to create the Android, and then they licensed it everywhere. Okay. But at the
Right.
time, Apple's very closed system. They did not want to license the iOS. That's different. Tesla is not a closed system. They are actively marketing that they want to license their software. So, could there not be a scenario where Tesla is like the premium brand, has 85% market share? Uh, not only 15% market share, but 85% of the margin. But actually, they get way more than 50% of the market share because they will license it to all these other brands out there. So
Yeah,
there
there
is
is a
that
scenario.
possibility, right? This is
Yeah,
very
there
different
is a
than what
scenario.
happened with the Apple.
Yeah, there is a scenario like that exists, and yeah, you're right. Tesla's been very open about that, so that's why we'll have to wait and see. But that software licensing, I'm trying to think of the margin implications. You know, that's going to be interesting because these companies still have to make the right decisions on product design for manufacturability, product design for cost. And software is not going to wipe that slate clean. What software is going to allow them to do is it's going to allow them to enter markets more seamlessly, and it's going to allow them to connect to other Tesla infrastructure type plays like
Mhm,
charging and potentially FSD better. But it's not going to clear the hurdle for them in terms of they're designing hardware inefficiently and they're manufacturing
mhm,
it inefficiently. So
mhm.
that's going to be the interesting thing to see. But yeah, they're going to need a lifeline. I think in a couple of areas. One would be in software localization and expansion globally, and the other thing would be probably in FSD.
Yep. All right, let's keep moving forward here. So you wanted me to share this as well. Tell me what this is all about. The June auto
Y-
sales rose 20% from a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, so last year there was a lot of constraints due to the inability of these companies to form more resilient supply chains. I don't actually blame it on COVID. I think they need to be more resilient in terms of how they manage their supply chain. There's a company that did it, Tesla. But yeah, so the last year's numbers were a little bit depressed. But the point is there's a 20% increase from June of the prior year, and more importantly, there was a 4% sequential increase from last month, May. So it's actually strengthening. The first half of the year, GM is bumping the SAR in their mind. They think it's going to go from 15 to 16 million units. SAR is the retail representation of how many cars will be sold out of dealers into consumers' hands in the calendar year of 20, in this case 2022 in the US. So GM opened the year with a 15 million SAR, and there's industry analysts that come up with these estimates, and then the auto companies weigh in. And it opened the year with a 15 million SAR, which was about was a million more than last year, more than a million more than last year, and about a 10% increase. And now they've upped it they think it's gonna be closer to 16. So they've seen that strength from May to June. So it tells you we have a pretty strong auto market. But again, a lot of this is being attributed to pent up orders and pent up demand of people that wanted vehicles last year, but there wasn't supply availability of them.
All right. So where exactly is this recession? And yeah, we're doing well compared to the yearly sales of new car sales. It's not it dropped for the last 2 years, but it's now looking like it's going back up again.
And this is going to help the CPI too, because the greater new car availability actually drove down the sales of used cars. Used car sales ramped and rocketed
Yeah,
because the automakers couldn't build enough new cars. And when used car sales rocketed, the
price.
average price
Yeah.
of used car sales rocketed as well. So with more new car inventory, it's going to actually help with the CPI and bring used cars down. It's going to be a big impact, I believe.
Hey there, thank you for joining me. If you can, please consider supporting this channel so I can keep it going. It's a lot of work arranging all these amazing interviews. One of the easiest ways is just to click that join button and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much. Let's get brighter. Okay, let's talk China. Lots of things happen in China. So that was the US. Great information there, stats that we just shared. In China, their economy is not seems to be picking up as fast as they were hoping to. Do you want to tell us what this is? China's running to deflation. The June
Yeah.
wholesale prices were unchanged. Yeah, what does this all mean?
Yeah, I mean, when you're this is the PPI, the producer price, and it sank 5.4% in a month. So the ninth straight decline, the steepest decline since December 2015. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. And this impacts a lot of things from a COGS perspective. First off, at the highest order bit, the China reopening is not happening at the pace or level that was anticipated coming into this year. Coming into this year, people are like, oh, the China restrictions are going to be lifted, China reopening, China's going to rip. And that means there's going to be a huge demand for oil. There's a huge demand for energy, which is going to ratchet up CPI, which is going to ratchet up energy costs, which is going to, which is, if you ratchet up energy costs, you're going to ratchet up all the other costs to get product to you. And that's just not happening. And that's causing energy to roll over a bit, and really commodities. I think I kind of study there's a commodity index from Bloomberg that I look at, and I think it was the last time I looked at it over a week, it was below the 200, well below the 200-day moving average, which means these things are, they're in a bad state, both technically and economically. So this China reopening happening slower is really impacting commodity costs. And it looks like they're headed towards, they're basically saying that they have 0% inflation is what they're saying. And I think their latest CPI number as well. So this is all leading into, I think we're going to see some commentary here about the China auto market, and there's implications to this, and there's implications to how vehicles are priced in China. You can't have producer prices falling that much, and you can't just be continuing to have this price war in China. So I think there's some information to look at that we've got coming up here, but that's how it all kind of connects together. China macro is going to really start connecting to the China auto macro, and it's going to have implications for Tesla and their competitors.
Okay. So let's get to this. 4 days ago, there was this big conference. We're going to review what they talked about in China. And according to this Shu, he's a deputy director of SIC, which is the State Information Center in China. And he went up prior to them doing this price war agreement, the 16 car companies, which we'll cover here. He actually said, that the profit for every Tesla vehicles is $10,400, while the average profit per BYD vehicles is 8,000 renminbi, which is I think it's about 1,000. I'll show you that shortly. This means that the profit per Tesla vehicle is 8.5 times higher than that of what BYD can do. And then this is it. So 10,400 for Tesla's profit. BYD is only 1,200. And so I don't know if this number was before the price cut or after the price cut. I was trying to research that, and I think there was some confusion, and I couldn't figure out when he said this. He said this just a few days ago, but whether these numbers was before or after the price cut. And I think it could be before the price cut. And so that's why he's warning. Basically, that's why they had to force them to sign the 16 car manufacturers a price war agreement, a truce, because they're saying you got to watch out. If we can't make profit, we're in trouble. And they already can't make a profit now.
Yeah, and this is why I was bringing up the point of margin share versus market share. So BYD's creeping up in this market share. Everybody's like, wow, look out for BYD. You should. I mean, but let's take a step back. They're going to get reductions in pricing, with scale. They're going to get some reductions, but people think that that's the only thing you need, and then you're off to the races. And that's just not it. That's just not true. If you don't structurally design your product from a unit economics perspective to hit kind of, these superior gross margin targets, all the techniques that Tesla used, reducing part count inside of their product, if you don't take these approaches and you design complex vehicles, but you just put them at lower price tiers, which is what BYD did. I mean, they took features out and they have a sub $30,000 vehicle. And that's driving up a lot of their volume in China, but it's not profitable volume, and that's the key. And this is it's actually a very dangerous game to be, near zero gross margins, basically. Not zero gross margins, zero operating margins. They've got decent gross margins. They got good gross margins, actually. The problem is their operating profit, when you put in all their OpEx, all their overhead that's involved, and those are all the inefficiencies in the company, that's where you lose that profitability per vehicle. So I think that's why margin share, I think, is an more important thing. But I said this last year. Someone was talking about, look at BYD. Like, BYD has to make 8 cars for every 1 Tesla sold just to get the margin dollars that Tesla, recoups. And I think that's the key takeaway. And that's why these companies are wanted to go in and sign this pact regarding pricing, which is, by the way, it's a very dangerous thing to enter into anything like that, because the MSRP is one thing, but there's incentives. There's also regulatory concerns about doing something like that from an antitrust perspective. I know the antitrust laws differ by country, but you have to be really careful as a global as a global device manufacturer or product manufacturer to enter in to any agreement like that. So I'm glad that it's kind of dissolving or fizzling, because it really should be based on competitive methods. And Tesla was going to take it to a point. They're not going to get more, I don't think, much more aggressive than where they are today. And the final thing is, if you take Tesla engineering and their approach to simplification and so forth and factory design, and then you layer on top of it China sourcing, China manufacturing, Tom Zhu's operation, you're getting the best of both worlds by those two happening together. And that's what I think people don't understand. They think, like, oh, the Chinese manufacturer is just all lower cost, all superior. But if you take those products apart and you look at them, we did this in the smartphone days. They were just running at basically razor thin margins, and they were making design decisions that were not super efficient. But over time, in a number of years, they will continue to improve rapidly. And that's why we got to continue to keep up the pace from an innovation perspective. But I think the takeaway here is margin share is more important. 8 BYDs have to be sold for every 1 Tesla. Maybe it's 6 now. The point is it's hard to structurally overcome a margin challenge that they're in right now, an operating margin challenge, by just scale. It just doesn't really come from scale only.
Yeah. Okay. So it's very interesting. This is coming from the government of China being very scared. They're in a precarious scenario. These Chinese car companies could die. So they come in and do this, but we'll report shortly that a few days later, there was a public outcry and they had to retract the price war agreement. So it's no longer in place today. But it's interesting to see what will happen, because obviously the Chinese government has to protect their Chinese car manufacturing industry. My thinking would be that they're going to partner with Tesla and then allow these Chinese car companies to then kind of go globally and conquer the world. But they're going to need to partner with Tesla at this point. And so they're going to play nice to Tesla as well. We'll see how this all plays out, because it could be bad news for Tesla, certainly. But I think at the end of the day, it could actually turn out to be really good news. And we'll see how this works out. So as part of the warning, Xu also said that, hey, listen, this cost, it's what you just said. The cost savings that Tesla has is only based on the 1.3 global million deliveries that they did last year. When they get to 1.8 this year, those costs are fall even further. And then the following year, they're just never going to be able to catch up to the margin capability that Tesla is able to do. So they signed this truce with the Chinese auto manufacturers. This was 16 China-based auto manufacturers in the China Auto Forum in Shanghai on July 6th. The top car makers, including BYD, Geely, and Xiaopeng, were all there. They pledged to avoid abnormal pricing in China, maintain fair competition. So the 4 key points was adhere to industry rules and regulations, regulate marketing activities, maintain fair competition, and not to disrupt fair competition with abnormal pricing. There you go. But then they say, pay attention to marketing and publicity methods, not to exaggerate or use false publicity. Great. Put quality first, improve lives. Great. promote core socialist values, actively fulfill social responsibilities, and take on the heavy responsibility of whatever this all is. Okay, but basically, so those are the four things that they had talked about. I'm going to play a quick episode here just to see what
on
a
Thursday,
little
kind
more
of led
detail.
by the CPCA, the China Passenger Car Association there, ending the price war there in China, which was already sort of dissipating as we saw recently, with some companies actually hiking prices just a little bit after all those huge downward revisions. It's all very strange, I think, for Americans to see it, but that's just how things are done in China. But it also may sort of signal a change with Tesla. Usually the company sort of went by the beat of its own drum and would kind of do its own thing, whether it's a bespoke charging network or direct sales to consumers in the US. But now you see a more mature Tesla working with competitors in China, opening up its charging network here in the US to other competitors, maybe kind of as the company matures and sees sort of its.
Yeah, but come on, Jeff. Tesla does not have much of a choice here. Chinese government comes and says, sign this agreement. Yes, let's do it. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they do, but there's many things they can do, right? They have a couple of different tracks for how they charge consumers. So there's the MSRP, there's incentives, there's delivery fees in China. I think there's also an insurance lane that Tesla also offers in China locally. So there's 3 or 4 different outlets, and all the manufacturers will be playing this as well. But the China consumer, their mindset, and again, I worked over there for 2 decades. I didn't live there, but I did a lot of work there and a lot of negotiating. Their mindset is smart. They want the best deal. They want to know that they got the best deal on the vehicle. And what they don't like is thinking they got the best deal and buying the car in June, and all of a sudden in July it's 5% lower. That causes a lot of unrest with the population. We say, like, well, it's life. This is what happens when you're driving a fast-paced business, and but it's not liked, it's not appreciated there. At the same time, the Chinese government is a state sponsor of some of those companies that are listed, meaning that there are dollars flowing between the Chinese government and those auto companies, in a way that's not part of a kind of a, I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of an ongoing, almost permanent style relationship versus Tesla doing a land deal or Tesla doing a one-off deal here or there. It's different, actually. So I think this is, I think they're going to kind of go and continue. I think they're going to cool off for a bit, but I do think that if they need to drive incentives, they'll drive them in other different areas. They won't, maybe they won't do a classic, sticker reductions as much as they were doing before, is what I anticipate.
Nice. I love it, Jeff. So that what you just shared there's a lot more that they can do. But it also appears like China government is not as powerful as we think, because just 2 days after they forced the 16 car manufacturers, including Tesla, to sign this agreement, they had to retract and end the agreement, apparently through public outcry. So the Chinese Automobile Manufacturers Association has canceled a section of the agreement signed this week by 16 automakers that attempted to end the electric vehicle price wars in China. So you can see here that it says here that the section down here says the pledge in question said the automakers would not disrupt the fair competition order of the market with abnormal pricing. They had to cancel them. So, this is public outcry. And then they had to remove it because it was inappropriate and violated the spirit of the anti-monopoly law. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Jeff, maybe the Chinese government is having to respond to the public outcry. Interesting.
Like I said, I've never seen anything like this. And in other industries, what happens is the manufacturers the OEMs go back and they figure out, if they're having an issue with sales at a particular price tier, they go in, they come up with a product really quickly at a lower price tier. And that's what they should be doing. And by the way, that's what Tesla is doing with, hopefully we see your Project Highland and then, future refreshes of the Model Y. They're going to actively continue to take those high running, high sales models and take their cost structure down further. And that's the ticket, is to do it that way and then offer, some savings back to consumers. So that's what I'm looking forward from Tesla. I don't think this all seemed kind of off and odd to me.
We are just at the beginning, just at the beginning. So I saw this beautiful table. I wanted to share it. I don't even know where I found this, but it's a great table. So you can see here that the black rows lines here, they're at this is a price cuts. This is the price cuts in China, not only of electric vehicles, but ICE vehicles as well. So the black is the gas cars, and then the blue is clean car brands. Okay. You can see that Tesla did definitely start the price war in January, but it's only 6.6% reduction. You'll see that other companies had slashed their prices significantly. And the reason why they did this is we've been reporting on this quite a bit as well, Jeff. We in many of our shows, we've shown that in China, the Chinese government is heavily incenting the electric vehicle adoption, but at the same time, they're heavily penalizing the the gas car companies. And so the anybody who's making gas car companies needs to unload them. I think it was it was last quarter. I can't remember now the actual date. And so they had to cut the prices to get rid of them because there was going to be heavy regulations that they need to now match in order to continue selling gas cars ongoing. But this is huge price cuts that was happening all across China, massive.
Yeah, and it just showed you what EVs were up against relative to ICE, and why there could have been some cooling maybe in the early part
Right.
of the quarter.
They could even
and
sold
now
more.
it's
Yeah.
right. They could have even sold more. And I think NIO at the end of the quarter capitulated and did some price reductions as well. But anyway, yeah.
Okay, good. Let's talk Ford. Let's talk US again. Let's come back to that. Let's see what's actually happening. So let's share some information here from Billy Gomes. He says Ford EV sales have not increased since 2021 and are trending down from 2022. This is the kind of table here. Let's take a closer look at the table. Here we go. So the light blue is 2021, the darker blue is 2022, and the red is 2023. So you can see we got the January to April here. What are we looking at? This is Ford, all the EV sales of Ford in the US.
And remember what a sale is. A sale is a shipment from the Ford manufacturing plant into the dealer. One thing that's happening, and we'll probably hear this in a bit, is that the inventory, if you look at Ford specifically in the Mach-E and the electric truck, the Lightning, which is a little bit less inventory, but they're running on average about double the DOI, the days of inventory of their ICE vehicles. So the Tesla price adjustments have, I think they're freezing out the other competition basically, and it's a problem for them, and they can't go much lower. If you look at the EBIT operating margins of Ford, the minus 102% or whatever from last quarter, if they were just to slash prices further without commensurate reductions on the COGS side, they're just stuffing more $100 bills, in the car before they ship it basically. So I think we calculated it was somewhere in the order of $58,000 to $60,000 that Ford basically, if you literally opens the glove box of the car and shoves in the car before they ship it out the door. Again, that's EBIT. That's all lines in. So yeah, they don't have a lot of room to work with. And so there's a couple of things going on in that graph with Ford. So they had a shutdown in January in their Mexico plant. They said they were reconfiguring it to grow for greater volumes and also do some price reductions or some cost reductions in the factory. And then the F-150 Lightning had the battery pack quality issue. That was, I think there was 6 weeks of downtime. So what was interesting to me is they had all that downtime. They had over a month of the Mach-E factory, and then they had over a month of the Lightning, and they're still building up inventory. So it tells me that there's definitely a disconnect or a dislocation in pricing, or they're not building a product that people want and desire. So I think that's something to look out for. And their sales in Q2 weren't meaningfully bigger than Q1, and they're well down from Q2 the prior year.
Okay, let's go and play this video clip of ex-Ford CEO Mark Fields, and then you'll get your
Yeah.
have to get your opinion and commentary on it. So,
former Ford CEO Mark Fields. Mark, good to have you back on again. Listen, people say, why am I knocking on EVs all the time? I'm not. The technology is cool. I woke up this morning in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I know a lot of people in Detroit, and I talked to a lot of people in Detroit, and I'm just going to tell you, there's a lot of people in mid to upper levels of management and line workers who are worried.
Well, the moment of truth is coming at us. And the reason for that, Brian, is, you have a number of high volume products in major segments, particularly for GM, that are going to be launching in the second half of this year. And when you look at affordability and you look at even the price of electricity is up significantly from, a couple of years ago when the automakers were starting to work on these electric vehicles. So, the issue for GM right now is their sales are small because they're ramping what they call their Ultium battery pack, which goes into their Cadillac Lyriq and their Hummer, which are, listen, by design, very limited volume vehicles. But later this year, they're launching the Blazer and the Equinox. And, that's the moment of truth because they dedicated full plants to these. These are high volume plants. So they need these vehicles to sell for them to make a return on their investment.
And
what'd you think, Jeff?
Yeah. So it's interesting. The host of this show on CNBC, he covers oil and gas primarily. He's deep into those industries, very deep. He knows all the CEOs of those industries. But he has to talk about EVs because they're so popular, both from an investment perspective and fintech and so forth. And they're growing rapidly. And then Mark Fields is, ex-Ford CEO, as you mentioned, I think Hertz CEO briefly as well. And so he's going to be coming at it from an interesting perspective as well, given his past. I mean, sometimes he plays it pretty level, but some of the comments regarding the price of electricity going up, I mean, maybe in pockets, other places it's down, other places it's flat. It hasn't changed for me. For me, it's $10 to go 300 miles. I charge overnight in my garage. It's as simple as plugging in my smartphone, and I plug in my car and walk away, and it knows when to charge, actually at the cheapest rates from an electricity perspective. Again, about $10 to go over 300 miles of range. If that was an ICE car with the kind of performance that a Model S or X Plaid has, that would be $90 to $100. So I don't know where they're going with the price of electricity, but I know they're kind of trying to shade things in a direction of like, scary EVs, look out. So let's play the next portion of it. We'll hear more.
And I talked to a lot of people in Detroit, and I'm just going to tell you, there's a lot of people in mid to upper levels of management and line workers who are worried.
Well, the moment of truth is coming at us. And the reason for that, Brian, is, you have a number of high volume products to these. These are high volume plants. So they need these vehicles to sell for them to make a return on their investment.
And excuse me, I've ridden in some of these cars. I rode in the electric GM Hummer. I rode in the Celestiq, which is, by the way, a beautiful car, one of the coolest looking in interiors and exteriors that I've been in.
$300,000
But when I also
car.
see, and I talk to dealers all the time, I spoke with a national car dealer kind of on a background call. He didn't want to go on the record. He said that demand in EVs is strong on the coast, but about 100 miles inland, with the exception of a few pockets, this is his word, demand is almost zero. Is there a chance that Detroit, one of the great American cities, I love the city, is headed down a path where they're going to make a bunch of products that people don't want?
Well, this could be a situation where actually Detroit is ahead of the curve, right?
Okay.
In terms of bringing products to market, that, the demand isn't there right now. I mean, right now, Brian, as you know, folks like GM and Ford made announcements that they were using the Tesla supercharging system a couple of weeks ago. And the reason for that was the OEMs are looking at it and saying, hey, I got these products coming to the market. I need to sell them. I need to take away any inhibitor from a customer that says, I may not want to buy this because it's difficult to charge. So I won't say, it was panic at the disco at the automakers, but they realize these products are coming, and it's harder for consumers to charge a vehicle than to fill up a tank of gas right now, and that's weighing heavily, and that's why you're seeing inventory of EVs.
Let me pause it there, Jeff. That was weird. I'm totally what? Their conclusion is that the consumer does not want to buy electric vehicles, or is it consumers don't want to buy their electric vehicles? I'm confused what they said there.
Yeah. And then talking about, I talked to somebody on the phone and he talked about sales on the coast versus inland. And like, okay, I talked to one person. How about, your CNBC? How about some statistics? How about some real data? There's industry associations. There's CPCA in China. There's, in the US, you've got Cox Automotive. You've got all this data that you can be pulling from. And you're just like, I called somebody at a car dealership and this is what
Yeah.
they said. And I sat in the Cadillac's the Celestiq, which is a $300,000 concept car that they'll make 10 of a year. I mean, this is how disconnected that they are. And I think, Mark Fields, there is panic at the disco actually with him. So they needed to make that supercharger deal. He's right, to reduce that friction between like, should I buy an electric car or not? Because there's nowhere to charge it unless I'm a Tesla. So that points too. But the other point he didn't say is that Ford and GM are in massive capital preservation mode and massive OpEx reduction mode. And their GM was very open. Mary Barra was open, like, hey, look, by partnering with Tesla, there's $400 million of spend that we would have had to have allocated towards the network that we don't need to do right now. So I think this is the first of probably several points of capitulation from the other auto manufacturers, but you just hear some of the commentary and the banter going back and forth, and it's not shaded in reality. It's shaded in, a little bit of, I don't know, anti-EV sentiment or what. But remember, and this is data from Statistica, Ford spent $110 million on ads for NBC Universal and CNBC in the last year. So take those ad dollars and divide them by the number of EVs they're shipping. You can kind of see, I think I actually even did the math on that. It's about almost $5,000 per EV shipped so far this year is just in ad dollars they spent the prior year. So you kind of see the narrative that's being built. And if you back to the graphs you were showing earlier, Herbert, where we actually show data on this show, the Ford F-Series and its dominance from an ICE perspective, that's their moneymaker right now. And that's where they need all the dollars to flow to currently. They don't have an EV solution right now. They don't have an EV solution right now. They put $60,000 in every car they ship and pack it up and ship it out the door. So they don't want to actually scale EV yet.
Yeah. So even with the $5,000 advertising per car AV, they still can't sell them apparently zero demand for them in Midwest. Okay. That's too bad. And we'll see what happens. Oh, sorry about that. When I keep pressing it, I keep going back to the old part. So
he's going to comment on inventory, a very important point on inventory here.
Let me go ahead and hopefully I find the right section here. Sorry, everybody. There's a little bit of here we go. Hopefully that's the right spot.
To charge a vehicle than to fill up a tank of gas right now. And that's weighing heavily. And that's why you're seeing inventory of EVs today about twice the day's supply, which is how the industry measures inventory. Twice the day's supply of internal combustion engines.
Volkswagen just laid off a bunch of workers in Germany because they're slowing the production of their ID3 and ID4 cars. And again, we're told this is the future, and I'm going to get a bunch of tweets, which is fine, which is there's nothing you can do about it. Just deal with it. This is the way it's going to be. California, no gas sales of the 2035. And again, that's fine. Everybody should buy the car or truck that not only they want, but can afford and best suits their lifestyle. And when I think about people, landscapers, that are pulling around tractor trailers all day long for hundreds of miles just to try to make a living or live 100 miles outside of LA because they can't afford to live in Orange County, how is this going to work for them? And I just hope, and you were in the boardroom, are those conversations taking place in the boardroom that not everybody is like you or I, and I can have an EV because it's my third car?
Yeah, those conversations actually have been happening over the last couple of years, because you're exactly right. When you look at early adopters of EVs, they got a lot of income, right? It's their third or fourth car. If they can't charge it or they can't, get it repaired, no big deal. But now you're getting to mass adoption. And as consumers are looking at the products, it has to have the right quality, the right price, but it also has the right convenience for them. And so I think when you look at the Detroit automakers, listen, they're a little bit insulated because the money where they make the most products they make the most market are their big trucks, their big SUVs. Those are not really tailored for EVs. But you got now a sweet spot of a lot of high volume product in key segments that they fertilized for, they spent capital on it, and they have to make these products work and these plants hum.
Okay. So confused. What do you think?
He's basically saying, like, look, that the foot is Tesla's foot is on the throat. I mean, when Tesla moved the average transaction price of their EVs to be below the average transaction price of ICE vehicles, that was a big turning point. And you're going to see the rhetoric and you're going to see the FUD ramping up, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You're going to see that happening right now. And
the host was saying at the beginning of that clip, the host was saying that what about the people who can't afford these cars? It's only being sold to the people who are rich. It's a third car kind of sell. It's like, what? I guess he's not understanding
it's the third or fourth.
Prices
It's the third or fourth car. Yeah,
that's what it was last year. I don't think that is what it is today. But
no, it's not. It's not current. It's not relevant information. And by the way, this is what's so good, for the Tesla community, is when someone like Gary Black, if he could have been on that show, or he is regularly on that show, Last Call, he sets the record straight pretty quickly. He would have known the average transaction price information right away. He would have blown through the, how it's difficult to charge these things. You can charge it like a smartphone. And I just think the points they're making are just ancient. But I think that days of inventory point is critical. They have either a pricing or a product issue. They have a pricing or a product issue because they don't have significant supply. They're not rapidly building these things up and stocking them into inventory. In fact, one of the big sales on Mustang Mach-E in June was a fleet sale, I think, to Uber. And so they're having an issue of getting these things sold through from dealerships in the people's hands. I think there's a couple of reasons. One is the sticker price, the MSRP of a Tesla is lower versus the specs. And two, the IRA has an implication as well. And that's only going to get a bigger advantage for Tesla as the IRA moves the point of sale in January.
Yeah.
So they have a product problem.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me show this, which is from Omar, which is, he explained this very nicely, which is what you just said. So he says in June, Ford sold just of June of last year, just 1,900 Mach-E's, but for sales to rise to 4,000, how did they do it? How did they do it? What you just said. They sold it through massive fleet sales. So they signed a deal with Uber. And then Ford is making unsold Mustang Mach-E's available directly to Uber drivers after the dealer said their lots were already full of them. So that's why I was asking you, why would inventory go up if they can just stuff the dealers, which is what they've been doing? But now they can't stuff it anymore. The dealers are saying, I can't take any more. And so what they had to do was sign this deal with Uber. And this is a deal right here. What was it now? Here. This deal, the press release for the date with the deal with Uber came out in June 2023, so last month. So perfect timing. They had to kind of do this just to show their sales continue to go up. These are a photo of a dealership from Guy dealership. Lots of Mach-E's for use by Uber. Yeah.
Yeah, Herbert, there's a big distinction on inventory. When Mark Fields was talking about days of inventory, he's actually talking about days of dealer inventory. So when we get the product and delivery numbers from Ford and GM, which they send them out the first couple days of the quarter, those inventory numbers that they report are from their dealership network. We don't know Ford and GM's four-wall manufacturing inventory. It's billions of dollars, by the way. It's not insignificant. We won't know that until they report earnings. So when he says DOI is double that of ICE, that's just in the dealer network. There's more EV inventory in the four walls of Ford that needs to be accounted for as well. We don't know what that number is until they report.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was a lot of information. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about a lot of great graphs at the beginning showing all the data for the global and the US year to date. Then we showed the price war in China. We came back and showing some kind of what's happening with Ford right here. Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate this.
Thank you,
See
Robert.
you next week, guys.